Individuos y hogares que ganaron $56,000 o menos en el 2019 califican para el servicio de impuestos gratis. Voluntarios certificados por el Servicio de Rentas Internas ayudaron a más de 2,000 residentes el año pasado.
Welcome everybody to today's meeting of the T&E Committee. Thanks so much to Lisa and Jeff from Mdot, and welcome to Jim Ritchie, the head of Mdot's Transit Work Group for this project. And we have a lot of county staff here, including Director Conklin, I now see, and welcome to Sean Hume as well from the Governor's Office. But my colleagues and I are eager to hear the latest from Mdot about the status of this very impactful project and the transit improvements that may accompany it. We have learned a lot about this project. We're watching it closely. We're looking forward to this briefing. And the events in recent months have generated a lot of questions from constituents about it. And we look forward to a robust discussion about its future. And I'm just checking with our staff we're dealing with a couple of technical glitches. I see Mr. Willanen here from MC.Dot, right?
Yes, Tom, I'm here. Thank you.
Yes, your identity was a little unclear from the darkness in your room, I think, to our staff. And then I think we have a frozen Gary Ehrenrich. Gary, are you with us? Okay, maybe he'll rejoin. But other than that, I think we're all good. So I think we can begin. So Dr. Orland, please take it away.
No, I think you gave a good intro, Mr. Tucker. I'll turn it right over to Lisa. She was going to give an overview and then turn to Jim Ritchie to talk about the transit connections.
Terrific.
In the interest of time.
Thank you so much.
Lisa, you're on.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Jim he's controlling the presentation, so I'm going to ask him to pull that up for us. But while he does that, and Jim, as you pull it up, if you could move to slide 2, but I'm just going to get things started. I'm just going to start talking.
Glenn, is it up?
I don't see it now. I thought you had it up. You had it up before.
You make sure.
We have the packet. Is this different?
No, it's not different.
Oh,
here, it's up now.
There we go.
It's up now.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So, Jim, if you could go to, is this slide 1 or 2? No, go back.
Go back.
Great.
Go back, sir. Thank you.
Cheerios.
There you go.
Okay, we're good.
I do.
We're good now.
You want some?
So thank you all. Thank you all for the opportunity to brief the Transportation and Environment Committee on the Transit Service Coordination Report. It's been developed over the last year with significant participation from Montgomery County, as well as other counties around the National Capital Region and regional transit providers to identify opportunities to enhance the transit supported by the managed lane systems that are being considered for I-495 and I-270. As already introduced, my name is Lisa Chaplin, and I'm the director of the I-495 and I-270 P3 program. I also have Jeff Holden with me today. Jeff is the deputy director of the P3 program. We have Sean Hume, I think which many of you might know. Sean is our strategic communications and intergovernmental affairs manager, and then Jim Ritchie. And Jim led the transit work group effort, so we really appreciate him being here today. Jim, if you could go to the next slide. So I want to first say that we at Mdot truly understand how COVID-19 is impacting all of the Marylanders today, how we work, how we spend our free time, and how we travel. While Mdot's #1 priority is the health and safety of Marylanders, we continue with our efforts to ensure transportation improvements are being developed not only to meet today's needs, but also well into the future of the next 20, 25 years. We've been working and continue to track the transportation trends in the region as the National Capital Region continues to slowly reopen normal activities under Governor Hogan's direction. we are committed to continuing to evaluate that new information as it becomes available on future travel demand in the region and as the situation evolves. Our transportation needs in the region have been continuously studied for over decades. The most recently adopted National Capital Region Long Range Plan, which I know you all are aware of, recognized that it would take a multitude of initiatives collectively to address our long-term transportation needs. This includes not only increased adoption of telecommuting, moving more people via transit, improved walking and biking access to transit, but also the expansion of the express highway system in the National Capital Region. Go ahead, Jim, you can go to the next slide. This balanced network includes both an investment to transit and highways. However, as this slide demonstrates, there is a substantial commitment to funding transit in the National Capital in comparison to highways. And the I-495 and I-270 P3 program is an effort to look at those improvements that are needed on the highway side. Jim, next slide. Thank you. So I just want to spend a few moments here talking about the program. Very large, it's over 70 miles, but it is, as I said earlier, looking to advance the Express Highway Network initiative that is covered under Visualize 2045. It encompasses in its entirety all of I-495 in Maryland, as well as the full limits of I-270. It encompasses multiple environmental studies, or we call them key elements, as several of the studies have not been initiated yet. The first study, the I-495 and I-270 Managed Lane Study, is more than 2 years old now, or into the NEPA process. It covers 48 miles. It's that darker blue. And includes I-495 from the vicinity of the George Washington Memorial Parkway in Virginia. It goes across the American Legion Bridge to west of Maryland 5. It also includes I-270 from I-495 up to I-370. As you may have heard us talking with Dr. Orlin, the draft environmental impact statement is expected to be released to the public in mid-July, followed by a series of virtual and in-person public hearings that we expect to begin in the August-September timeframe, and that's all subject to change based off of where we are with the governor beginning our rolling back into the new norm. Our second program element is I-270 from I-370 to I-70. We're in the pre-NEPA activities at this point. That involves the upper 23 miles in the light blue of I-270 from Gaithersburg to Frederick. Those pre-NEPA activities are really preliminary planning activities. They started last June, and we expect to have those concluded by the end of this calendar year. Ultimately, that third piece, a third study, which is in the purple at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, is the last piece or last environmental study that we will conduct, and it will go from west of Maryland 5 over to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and we will be coordinating that in the future with Virginia Department of Transportation. Next slide. In the meantime, we've been hearing some about this over the last several months. We are coordinating closely with Virginia Department of Transportation as they advance their environmental study for the I-495 Northern Extension, or NEXT project. That project extends their existing express lanes to the vicinity of the George Washington Memorial Parkway near the American Legion Bridge. In addition, we're working very collaboratively with Mdot MTA, so the Maryland Transit Administration, along with the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation on a joint American Legion Bridge transit study to look at transit and travel demand management solutions to address congestion across the bridge. That study just got kicked off a few weeks ago, and it's expected to take until about next spring to be completed. They recently asked us to identify the individuals on our transit work group from Montgomery County and Frederick counties, and so they will be reaching out to those individuals to see if they are willing to participate on that effort as well. Next slide, Jim. So as I noted earlier, the regional plan includes a significant investment in transit in the National Capital Region, and we considered all of the projects in the regional plan in our analysis. As we began the managed lane study before adoption of the 2045 regional model, the managed lane study, the DEIS, traffic analysis are based on the 2040 MWCOG model. That 2040 MWCOG model assumes all the projects in the constrained long-range plan, such as the Purple Line, light rail, and bus rapid transit projects. Also includes US 29 and Randolph Road, North Bethesda Transitway, and also increased market capacity and frequency. The 2040 land use assumption in the MWCOG model that was provided by each of the counties, and it's based on their approved development plans and future master plans. These projects and land use are all assumed to be in place under the no-build scenario and were assumed in the model for all the build alternatives under the managed lane study. And so even with those projects in place, traffic on I-495 in 2040 will be significantly congested traveling. We have determined less than 15 miles an hour in many sections without significant improvements for the I-495 and 270 travel demand. The COG model, as I mentioned, recently was updated to 2045, and although our traffic analysis did not initially include that, we will be updating, after the DEIS, we will be updating our traffic analysis. And in the 2045 model, those recently added transportation projects included Montgomery County's BRTs, the Maryland 586 Beers Mill Road BRT, the 650 BRT, and Maryland 355 BRT. However, our preliminary findings from the 2045 sensitivity analysis, even with all the additional transit improvements, the no-build model still performs worse than the no-build of 2040 model. Continuing to demonstrate, we feel that highway improvements are necessary. So one of the things we wanted to highlight here is transit under managed lanes, that they are complementary. They provide new options and opportunities for both transit and highway users. They provide the opportunity for more reliable transit service to encourage more people to use transit. And the managed lanes, coupled with easy access to park and ride lots served by limited stop express buses, can provide time competitive options for driving that encourages people to leave their vehicles behind. Next slide, Jim. So to best identify the transit opportunities for the P3 program, as you're aware, a transit work group was formed a little over a year ago. As I mentioned, the group included planning and transit professionals from throughout the region. I want to thank specifically Chris Conklin and Phil Foglin and Gary Aaron Rich and Dan Hibbert for their contributions that they made to that transit work group, and I believe some of them are on this call and presentation as well. The group examined commuting patterns and projected population changes and identified underserved markets. A thorough review of access points and transit station locations was also performed, and service concepts were vetted, and park and ride facilities were examined. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jim Ritchie, and Jim is going to get really into the details of that transit report for you.
Lisa, thank you for waiting and make sure I am unmuted. Lisa, thank you very much. Let's get right into it. First of all, we wanted to recognize, and we did at the beginning of this work, the incredible investments that's been made already by Montgomery County, and Montgomery County is continuing to make. The local transit investment for Ride-On, the associated services, is currently about $140 million. In addition to the local transit contributions, the county and its citizens are making contributions to WMATA through the Washington Suburban Transit Commission through their property taxes. You've also made incredible investments with the Bethesda station, with Geo Bonds contributed, and are also a key contributor to the Purple Line. Your Flash BRT services that will soon be opening later this year are a real statement to the quality of the service that Montgomery County intends to provide. Now, just as Montgomery County really has been all in for transit, Maryland has been too. Maryland is making incredible investments in the Metro Rail with 7 lines into suburban Washington, the Purple Line under construction, also in the Baltimore market, the Metro Subway Link, Light Rail Link are rail services in Baltimore, and the commuter rail services connecting Baltimore and Washington, all part of very substantial investment by Maryland. Just as Maryland's investing in rail, Maryland's investing in bus as well. For Metro Bus, there's 45 lines in Maryland that the state is contributing to, about 99,000 riders a day on those bus services. In addition, the partnerships between Montgomery County Ride On and Prince George's County The Bus make substantial transit investment. And then the commuter bus service, whether it's from Charles County or Frederick County or Howard County, all significant contributions. The Baltimore bus services are also a key part of Mdot's investment. Now, when you look at it, when you look at the total budget, the 6-year combined capital and operating program, the state's contribution to WMATA and to Maryland Transit Administration is 48% of the surface transportation program. Now, one of the things we know right now is revenues have really taken a hit as a result of COVID-19. And ultimately, we'll all have to see what of this program will be able to deliver. Revenues will really make that decision for us. Now, the managed lane program, however, brings a new opportunity for transit. It truly will be a backbone and the opportunity for a new fixed guideway. It'll mean improved operating speeds for the commuter bus services, as well as the ride-on routes that use the corridors today. It helps us to explore and to develop new underserved suburban to suburban markets, and we think there's an opportunity for partnership with Virginia and really to incorporate technology and innovation. Now, we started with the transit market analysis, and I want to highlight this for you all today, both the population and the employment. Montgomery County isn't the fastest growing in terms of rate in Maryland, but it has the largest growth at 178,000 more residents projected by 2045. Frederick, growing at 31%, will add 80,000 more residents. That growth, especially as it's coupled with jobs in the DC area, will mean an increased traffic and increased market for transit in the I-270 corridor. On the employment side, DC and Arlington are projected to grow by 260,000 jobs. Montgomery County, 140,000 jobs. And you see Montgomery County will continue to be a place that people are commuting to. In addition to the county level population, we looked at the major activity centers, with Rockville projected to grow by about 29% and Bethesda and Silver Spring, each growing by 16 to 17% over the 25-year period. Now, we looked at many of the interchanges. What we wanted to really make sure is, were we giving the best opportunity for access to our metro rail stations, our commuter rail stations, and also for our commuter bus services. As I mentioned before, we have looked at 370 South. 370 North is in the next phase of environmental work, and as those get defined, exactly what those locations are for transit will be quite important. Now, we listened during this work to the Montgomery County staff and the ideas for how we could develop this service or transit services in conjunction with managed lanes. First recognition is traffic from Frederick continues to increase, and we've got to find ways to capture people before they get on the interstate. So additional park and ride capacity for commuter bus and MARC train is important. We also have the new Metropolitan Grove access ramps or the Watkins Mill interchange, which can provide real good access at the Metropolitan Grove station. We know that additional park and ride capacity is also needed in Germantown and Clarksburg. And one of the points that we want to strongly make through the managed lane program is we've got to have north-facing ramps at 370 so that the transit services can get in from the managed lanes into the Shady Grove Metro Rail station. One last point on this slide that your staff emphasized is that the bus capacity at Shady Grove really needs improvement, both on the east side and the west side. Staff really looked at this as an opportunity to coordinate the managed lane access locations with the express routes, but also observed if we don't put in enough service, we won't really be able to shift people out of their automobiles. And this is truly an opportunity to develop an integrated service network between commuter bus, your ride-on service, and your emerging Flash BRT services. We looked at services in the I-270 corridor from Clarksburg to College Park, from Monocacy to Bethesda, and Germantown, Gaithersburg, and Montgomery Mall to Tyson's Corner. In the I-495 corridor, we looked at Greenbelt to White Oak to White Flint, and Columbia to Bethesda, which we think can be integrated into the Flash BRT service on US 29. Now, each of these corridors is a little bit different and has a little bit different idea for the transit service concept. But throughout all of them, we want to make sure that we're improving the efficiency of the existing routes. We want to support the existing transit services. We want to foster the suburb-to-suburb markets, and we want to advance transit partnerships for intra-regional and interstate trips. In the I-270 corridor, we're calling our concept an enhanced transit network, so that it's not a service, but it's really how all of the services work together that will be important. We wanted to allow a really good service with a single transfer to regional destinations and fast transit connections from Montgomery County to Tysons, Arlington, and Alexandria. In the I-95 and 495 section, we think the improved east-west connections are possible, whether it's a pattern on the US 29 Flash, which would allow a connection over to Bethesda, or connecting White Oak and White Flint. In the Prince George's County area, Terry Bellamy wanted to talk about a virtual BRT to enable the managed lanes to act as if they were exclusive for the bus rapid transit services. And we have a number of alternatives that can work in the I-495 East section. We looked at enhancements to the existing services with 11 additional routes. I won't go through them all right now. We will on the next couple of slides. But we don't think this is the ultimate network, but we thought this was the right place to start with evaluating what would work. In the I-270 corridor, we had services both from Frederick to Shady Grove and on to College Park, and also from Germantown and Gaithersburg to Tyson's Corner. There will need to be some capital improvements in the first phase, the section that's south from the American Legion Bridge to I-370. We think additional park and ride capacity will be needed at Westfield Montgomery Mall. And as I already mentioned, the Shady Grove Metro rail station needs additional bus capacity. In the Phase 1 north section from I-370 up to Frederick, integration with the Metropolitan Grove station will be important. The Germantown Transit Center needs expansion and needs to be convenient on and off the interstate. Park and ride expansion will be important for Metropolitan Grove, Germantown, maybe at Dorsey Mill, Clarksburg, Hightstown, Urbana, and Monocacy. Again, those specific locations, we don't have a design yet for the roadway improvements. In the 495 corridor, we already mentioned briefly the idea for a Purple Line Light rail provides new connections inside the Beltway, so that we think we can, with a BRT or a virtual BRT, extend the influence of the Purple Line. Now, mention the idea of the flag 29, that when it gets down to the managed lane, it could provide direct access to Bethesda. And we think the major activity centers of White Oak and White Flint can work very well with an all-day connection. The potential improvements there is a White Oak Transit Center, as well as we think you're going to need additional US 29 corridor park and ride. One of the real things that the managed lanes really can do is improve the opportunity incentives for carpools, van pools, and travel demand management. Really, not only because of improved travel speeds, but also the opportunity to use technologies and the transit and carpooling apps. And we wanted to point out from I-95 in Virginia, the real growth that has occurred in the HOV3. This is data from Virginia's systems. And we see that the number of toll customers continue to increase on I-95. And this is a period 2014 through 2017. But the HOV3 customers grew even faster. The same is seen on the I-495 corridor, where because of recurring traffic congestion on 495, there's a lot of folks that are willing to use the express lanes. But also there was substantial growth in the HOV3 market. Now, this report that we've now developed, the Transit Service Coordination Report, is not the end of the collaboration. It's really the beginning. And Secretary Slater has requested representatives from the affected counties to work with Mdot to develop the regional transit solutions. And Lisa, I know you want to say just a few words to close for us.
Thanks, Jim. So as you can see, Jim really gave you a higher level summary of the report. As I said, we've spent over the past year a great deal of work and comprehensive analysis developing a network of potentially feasible transit solutions. The report is intended to inform the planning process for the transit services and related capital infrastructure needs, such as transit access and bus and park and ride facilities like Jim mentioned. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to discuss the P3 program and the Transit Service Coordination Report. Welcome your comments and questions now, but I do want to recognize, I think Emil Wolin and Emil, I apologize if I butchered your name, but Emil has been designated as our point of contact for Montgomery County. So we will be, we've reached out to Emil, and we will be begin that coordination in the very near future to talk specifically further detail with Montgomery County as we develop the opportunities for the transit service in the county. Thank you.
Emil, do you want to jump in and respond? Or should we go to questions from?
Tom, we've been waiting for Lisa and her team to reach out to us. We started some internal coordination just based on the report that the state put together for us. So looking forward to working with Lisa and Jeff and the team.
Great. And I can't see Director Conklin. Chris, do you have any response? Oh, there. Do you have any response at this point, or should we get to questions from council members?
It could be useful to go to questions. We're happy to chime in if there's anything you want our opinion on.
Okay. Thank you. I have a few, and then let me turn to my colleagues. Jim, thank you so much for the report. Thanks for acknowledging our record investment in transit for Montgomery County. I think we might respectfully disagree about the state's obligations. As you know, we're not happy with the long-term, the state's investment, and we're happy with the state's increased investment in WMATA for sure. You're right. But we make so many of our investments reluctantly because of the long-term underinvestment, the way we see it from the state in terms of BRT, Ride-On, and other locally serving transit from the state, which has been I think underfunded. You've recommended, we're glad to see improvements to the P3 project that my colleagues and I recommended over a year ago, including the managed lanes to Virginia and transit at National Landing, and the connections to activity centers and locally serving transit throughout Prince George's and Montgomery, including White Oak and White Flint and Shady Grove. Just a few questions. The Secretary has mentioned privately and publicly that to comply with the direction from a majority of the Board of Public Works, Prince George's and Montgomery County would receive grants of at least 10% of the toll revenue, beginning with the revenue from the first vehicle paying a toll rather than at the original conception once the bonds were paid off decades from now. How has your planning reflected that major change, and do you have any analysis of what we might expect from that structure?
So thank you, Councilmember Hucker. So where we are with that process is, as mentioned, the next step in the process in evaluating the opportunities and incorporating opportunities to expand transit service of Montgomery County is working with Emil and the rest of the county to develop what those options are. The intention is to take the transit service report. That's really kind of I would say the foundation, but we're also looking in continuing those discussions with Montgomery County to further consider other opportunities that may be suggested. But the first step is for us to work with the county and develop a memorandum of agreement or understanding. And we made that commitment when we went to the DPW. And those opportunities or potential options would be identified in that MOU. We're too early in the stage to really develop construction estimates. We're still in the planning effort, but the intent is to identify those options, and then once the phase that would go into the phase developers P3 agreement, and we would work collaboratively with the county and the phase developer to further define those.
Thank you. So there's no change in the assumption and no analysis that we can look at this point.
No, there's no further analysis.
But based on your last comment, it's fair to expect Mdot to add language to any P3 contract requiring the private partner to fund transit enhancements with the toll revenue from the express lanes, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
If I could weigh in just a little bit.
No.
There's a lot of good ideas in this report, and clear the opportunity for long distance transit to take advantage of the managed lanes infrastructure. From our perspective in DOT, we are still, wondering whether that's a better use of the available funds than some of the longer term plans we've had for improving access to the Great Seneca Science Corridor, the 355 BRT, or other transit solutions. So, as Lisa mentioned, we have not yet started those discussions, but there's a platform of information here that's going to help us get underway with that.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Conklin. Lisa, will Mdot also look at transit service on parallel corridors to these highways and require the toll revenue fund locally serving transit like we're envisioning on Maryland 355 or University Boulevard? Or would that just be up to the county?
Yeah, Jeff, I think that would be up to the county, but please correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff.
Jeff, did you hear Lisa's question?
No, you're accurate.
Okay, great, thanks. And
I'm having some internet connection.
No worries. It's our daily experience. Why is monorail not mentioned in this report? Should it be?
So, if you may recall, Councilmember Hucker, that as part of the BPW, there was, I think it was even in June now, there was a request for Mdot to look at monorail. So we had made that commitment. The monorail, there is a study, a feasibility study that is being developed, I want to say independently, but we are collaborating. So we are forming each other about information. That report, feasibility report, is actually being led through Mdot, through the Secretary's office. We're still awaiting the results of that, but we've communicate and shared information, but it's a separate study.
Okay, no change, but we're still looking forward to that. And then here's two last questions that I keep getting from my colleagues. As you know, travel demand is way down due to COVID-19. And how does Mdot anticipate the long-term results in terms of travel demand of the COVID-19 pandemic? Because certainly many experts expect telecommuting is way up. People expect it to stay that way, certainly among white-collar workers that have that available option. Have you analyzed any long-term reductions in travel demand, and how do they affect this project?
So I think I captured everything that you asked. You were kind of breaking up at the beginning, but we obviously are committed to continuing to evaluate and watch as we start to roll out in the national capital region regarding the uptick of increased traffic on the highway system. Some things to consider. We've actually, since June or early June, have seen about approximately 80% return of traffic to the Maryland's highways. And so that is, it's slowly coming back. We are monitoring it, but it's actually returned to about 80% of what it was pre-February. So we're monitoring that. Some of the things that we've recognized as we went through the managed lane study and taken into consideration is, and we need to continue to take into consideration, is the study and the program is looking for long-term improvement. So even if there is additional telecommuting, we need to plan our projects and develop our projects for 20, 25 years down the road. The other thing that we've taken into consideration is, even though we look at all the traffic that's on or has in the past been on the Capitol Beltway and I-270, the teleworking or the commuters for work is actually a fairly it's only a part of a percent of the traffic out there. There's a significant amount of traffic on the roadways that are based off of people just making trips, and whether that is it's service trips or whatever the case may be. But we are monitoring it. We continue to monitor it as we start to roll out. But we are already seeing an uptick of the traffic back to the Capitol Beltway and I-270 as the governor and the region have started to relax some of the restrictions.
You're saying it's back up to 80% of pre-COVID levels, and you expect it to return to 100% of pre-COVID levels soon?
I can't tell you the timing of that, no, but we do expect that we will see, I can't tell you the timing. Part of the reason for that is certainly in the, term of people, the ones that go back to work. So I'm not talking about the ones that continue teleworking, but the ones that continue to or go back to work. Studies have shown around the country already that what they're seeing in other parts of the country where we're going back and relaxing, people are concerned about riding transit, and so they're actually using their cars more than they are actually using transit.
I guess it's also hard to know motivations given how much transit has been cut service nationally. But no, I think the 80% figure would be really surprising to people. And then just finally, our current enormous P3 project that's being managed by Mdot has had some problems. Has Mdot conducted a formal hot wash to distill all the lessons learned from that P3 project? And what are the lessons learned you're sharing? Have you shared that with us, and what are the lessons you're applying to this project?
So I lost you at the last part of that, but
have you analyzed what you've learned from the Purple Line and the problems that we're experiencing right now, and how are you applying that? Have you shared those with us, and how are you applying those to this P3?
So we certainly continue to talk about those concerns with the Secretary. We are not privy to all the information that is related to the Purple Line, but I do want to point out that there are distinct differences between the Purple Line P3 as well as this Highway P3. The Purple Line was solicited as a fixed price P3, which means that there was when the developer came, there was a price that was established. There was also a certain amount of design that was done by Mdot, MTA, in which, as part of that development, there was, I would say, significant risks that were then associated with the state. Under our approach that we're using around the country and in the industry, it's called a progressive P3 or a pre-development agreement P3. And the distinction there is that we are taking the design, or I would say, we're going through the NEPA process, as you're aware, but that phase developer will actually come on at the conclusion of the NEPA process, and then we will be working with them collaboratively as well as our stakeholders to further develop the design and get into the design details, also allowing the ability for us to further reduce and identify risks and mitigate those with the phase developer. That model, because it was not followed on the purple line, it was just a different model that was used. There really was not that opportunity during that pre-development phase that we will have to further define and mitigate and minimize and hopefully eliminate the risks and some of the issues that are occurring on the purple line.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Let me call on my colleagues. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much, Chair Hucker. Good questions. I appreciate you asking them, and thank you for the thorough presentation. Continuing some of the line of thought that the chair had, during the COVID-19 crisis, clearly transit ridership is down regionally, nationally, internationally, and here at least we know that so many people who are taking the public transportation are our essential personnel who really have no other option. And so it really is so important that we're able to maintain those services during this crisis so that our responders and emergency staff can continue protecting the community. And I think as it was noted, these plans are for decades in the future. Another important point to note, so that we continue doing our governance of planning for those who will benefit from the work that we're doing now. And so framing it that way, I think, is really important. But similar plans have been made in the past. And so I have to express some skepticism a little bit about this proposal because we've been working on transportation infrastructure, public transportation, different types of networks for a long time. And some of them get funded, some of them don't get funded. Some of them, as has been mentioned, like the Purple Line now, we thought was funded, but might not be funded to the level that needs to get the project done. And so, talk to me about the best laid plans and what you really think the likelihood or timeline of this moving forward is, and how all the different parts would need to be assembled in order to get this done.
So unfortunately, Councilmember Glass, I missed a significant part of what you were saying. I apologize. I'm having.
You sound like my husband now, but that's okay.
But I heard the last part, which was about the, to the degree that we really think that we're going to be able to deliver on this. I think everyone is aware, due to the recent press release from Mdot, that we received 4 proposers on this first phase. I can't really express to you how overjoyed we were to have that. This is a large program. There is competition out there, not just in the country but around the world. To see 4 proposers, come, I would say, at the starting gate is just, to me, really shows the magnitude of the interest in the program, and specifically phase 1. From my perspective, and I think I can speak for the secretary, we are very confident and comfortable that as we go through the solicitation process, that, we are going to have, at the end, which will be about this time next spring, we'll have identified a successful phase developer to work with in these redevelopment activities. And then ultimately, we would look, we call them a section developer, but they are the developers. So we're going to take that phase one and we're going to break it down into smaller pieces in order to deliver it, right? Because we couldn't deliver it all as one phase. But those section developers will be actually the ones doing the final design and construction. We plan to have that first section developer with a final agreement to go to the DPW on that in the latter part of 22. So we really, we think we've established a structure that allows us to work with a phase developer to define manageable pieces and deliver those in a way that we can, work, work at delivering this. And so I think, the approach that we're taking in comparison, if we had done a fixed price solicitation, is really going to benefit us in the outcome and giving us that opportunity to really respond. Now, I cannot speak to the remainder of the program. As you're aware, we got BPW's approval for phase one, and that's where our focus is solely at this point. So, what happens with the remainder of the P3 program, we'll see. But I don't expect us to be really actively pursuing that from a solicitation standpoint until we get through this, at least through the first section developer and have them under contract.
Thank you for that. And you in your comments mentioned the fixed price and not doing it the same way that the purple line is being done. And I know the chair asked that question, but can you repeat that just so that I understand it as well again?
Sure. So there's kind of two. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's kind of two main ways of delivering on a P3. One is a fixed price solicitation. The other one is what's called a pre-development agreement. It's kind of been coined recently. Another term is called a progressive P3. With a fixed price solicited, the state, the owner, takes the level of design to a certain point where they develop the technical requirements as well as the performance or specifications that the P3 developer has to, return on. But in doing so, there is also an establishment up front of risks. So the state takes a certain amount of risk and the developer takes a certain amount of risk. Under the the progressive P3, because we will be going through pre-development activities, which will be furthering the design, looking at, and under that design, minimizing impacts, developing a risk register in which we will be working with that developer, that phase developer, to further mitigate, minimize, and like I said, hopefully eliminate risks. That gives us an opportunity once we get to that section phase developer to really have a good defined cost and expectation on that particular section. And so that pre-development or progressive P3 really gives us, an additional benefit of, I would say, mitigating and moderating risks that may be associated with the phase. Jeff, I don't know if you want to jump in and say anything more to that.
I could just add, this is a similar process we're doing right now in the I-270 Innovative Congestion Management that's going on right now on 270. And I believe, I don't want to speak for Chris, but I believe it's very similar to construction management at risk, which I believe the county is doing on the White Flint West workaround right now. So this isn't a...
Leaving us hanging. It's not your own adventure there, or your adjective. Okay.
Yeah. EMAR contracting both for White Flint and for US 29. Councilmember Glass, if I could just say one thing about the likelihood of this occurring. One of the things that we would have preferred to see is these transit elements embedded into the NEPA process for these projects, and they're not. It was a standalone side study, which it doesn't discount the value of the work, but we have to be cognizant as we go into the FEIS, the final environmental impact statement, that there's something that more concretely ties the provision of the transit to the approvals of the project. And there may also happen through other agreements, but we would have preferred to see it done in an integrated way from the beginning.
Okay, I appreciate that. Last question I have is in some of the proposals, or as it was shown, there are new on-ramps, off-ramps along 270 for some of the transit, or maybe it's just for the managed lanes. Would that affect any of the right-of-way? Would there need to be any right-of-way purchased for any of that new development?
I'm sorry. All I heard was about the direct connections, and I couldn't hear you after that.
Do you know if any additional right-of-way would need to be purchased for any of that work along 270 for the on and off ramps?
So I'm sorry, were you looking at a specific location or just in general?
In general, because there were a number of different designs or a number of different slides in the deck. Yeah.
So in general, so the slides that you were provided, all those potential direct access points are included in the draft environmental impact statement. So they have been, through the NEPA process, we have been evaluating what, if any, impacts would be related to from a right-of-way, from an environmental, the whole kit and caboodle. So, I can't answer you in any specific location off the top of my head, but as far as any potential right-of-way impacts, those are covered in the DEIS. So that will, once that's issued, we're hoping it'll be out by mid-July. All that information will be available to the public.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I'll just close in the sentiment that I opened with, which was increased skepticism of certain public-private partnerships related to transportation infrastructure projects. And so I think we need to tread carefully and look at the fine print as this moves forward to make sure that projects are done in accordance with our vision, and that ultimately the taxpayers of Montgomery County and the state of Maryland don't get left holding the bag if any fine print is misread or not included correctly. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass. Councilmember Reamer, any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you. I would like to just ask Director Conklin to share, stepping back a little bit, what your understanding of this set of recommendations is. Any comments you want to make? Your comment a moment ago about how you would have preferred this was part of the DEIS. And I know that MCDOT was part of the working group. Does this recommendation reflect what Montgomery County sought? Are there elements of this transit component that we also wanted that weren't provided in this recommendation?
Well, thanks for that, Hans. I think that we did participate in the study, and it does reflect ideas that we've brought to the table, like the importance of the HOV use, the park and ride needs in the corridor.
Did a little bird tell you that?
Yeah, there's a bird telling me a lot right now. And the study is narrow. The study focuses on how transit can use the managed lanes infrastructure. So in that regard, it is a portion of what we think is the right approach to transit for this corridor. It is certainly not the entirety of it. And as we begin to advance the discussions with Mdot on this, we're going to have some probably difficult discussions about what should be part of the project in and of itself on the merits of the project versus what is, represents that contribution to the county to provide transit. Because these strategies really are long distance strategies, and they don't meet the needs of our communities. By and large, they're making trips of shorter length along this corridor, and they don't necessarily serve our activity centers as well as some of the other transit concepts that have been developed over the past, like the Corridor Cities Transitway, or that in a modified form, or the 355 BRT and its connections across the county using Beers Mill. So there's a lot to come on this. I think it is positive that these ideas have been developed, and the state has, the two people on the phone and others have demonstrated a different approach to working on these issues with the county than the previous leadership of Mdot had. So I think we are improving the dialogue, and there's promise here, but there's a very long way to go before we think we have the right answers for the project.
Thank you. That's very helpful. To Glenn Orland, I think in January of 2018, we worked together and sent a letter to the governor about a vision for incorporating bus service, BRT, into the network. I gather that is what this represents in a lot of ways, but the key element of it was expedited entrance and exit to the managed lanes, and there was some infrastructure that would be needed in order to make that possible. So what do you see here? Or Chris, if you're I'm sure you're also aware. I mean, can the county comment on this idea of entrance and exit ramps that allow buses to not get caught into long queues and then really accelerate the time of the trip?
A lot of that thinking is reflected in the southern half of the corridor, with the Westlake Terrace access, Scooty Drive access, Wooten Parkway access that are direct connections to the managed lanes facilities. We have in the Shady Grove recommendations that Jim mentioned in his presentation about the north facing ramps, which are not currently reflected in the 370 South, are important to make those connections. He also referenced Watkins Mill for accessing Metropolitan Grove. And there's still a lot of detail to be worked out on the northern half of this because the environmental process has not proceeded to come to those answers yet, but we have provided recommendations to Mdot about how those connections could be made at interchanges or locations that aren't currently served, like Dorsey Mill Road in Germantown, the Little Seneca Parkway in Clarksburg, that could have a nexus to the redevelopment of the Comsat site and potential park and ride facilities. So I think there's been a lot of progress in the development of the environmental documents for the southern half and trying to make the connections as good as they can be. We are very challenged compared to some other locations that our metro stations are not exactly proximate or easily accessed from the highway corridors. So they're all indirect. But I think what's been identified is a good set of solutions. And Glenn probably has a view as well, but that's my view.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. The letter you're speaking of, Mr. Reamer, was actually just from last March, where it was on the scope of the managed lane study. And one of the things that was suggested in there was to have these direct ramps to certain overpasses, particularly on I-270. I didn't expect to see them on the Beltway, but the state's showing those as well. In terms of the transit investment, I mean, the positive thing about this report is that these direct ramps, because they're also providing access for toll-paying users, the transit access off and on, which will save transit a lot of time from having to merge all the way across several general use lanes, then merging all the way back across to exit, will be a great advantage to transit. And the entire cost of the ramps ought to be included in the highway part of this project. So I don't disagree with what Chris is saying. We have, some long-term projects like the Corridor Cities Transitway and 355 BRT in this corridor, which will be more locally serving, but will also require a lot of capital costs. And if most of the 10% or whatever money we get goes to those projects. The only money that we would really need in the way of capital for what this study is pointing out is buying buses, or maybe helping to pay for additional bus depot spaces, and maybe some park and ride, but it'd be relatively minor compared to the CCT or the 55 BRT in terms of capital. So I don't see them as being necessarily conflicting. The bigger problem over time, I think, is going to be operational costs, because even with all the ridership we hope could happen, transit's still never going to pay for the cost of operations. And so before we really go too far with this, I think the follow-up study would be what would be the annual operating costs for all of these services, because what we're talking about here is a huge expansion of bus service. How much would that be offset by revenue, and is that sustainable? So hopefully it can work. I'm not quite as pessimistic on the ability to provide the capital cost for the system, but I guess I'm still skeptical about the operating side.
Okay, well, that is certainly key. I mean, the opportunity to have long distance rapid bus service is really significant. You know, that's something we do need. There really isn't a good way to get from Rockville, Gaithersburg, Germantown to Northern Virginia, for example. And this would provide that mechanism. So making sure that it is an optimal system, I think it should be a really high priority. But I'm assuming that Glenn and Chris, that you're continuing to follow that along, and to the extent that we need to take a position or advocate for something as a county to bring that to fruition, you know, you'll keep us in the loop on that, right?
Well, and we'll check in with this committee or the council as a whole as milestones in this conversation occur.
Now, I did have a question about one transit impact or related issue, which is the Mark Bridge over the Beltway in Kensington. How is that factored into the strategy? Does it have to be taken down to for whatever happens? I mean, I guess that's phase 2, so that's a long way out in the future. But frankly, it may not even be worth talking about if it's phase 2. But
Mark Bridge in Germantown and Gaithersburg also.
Yeah, are we assuming, do we know for a fact that whatever happens to those bridges, that they'd be reconstructed in a way that supports the future expansion of Mark?
Jeff, do you want to try and answer that one?
Well, the bridge in Silver Spring, it's part of the managed lane study, and it's been looked at just from the perspective of reconstructing it. So they replaced and realigned. So we have not had any conversations about widening that bridge to have a third track. So that hasn't been discussed to that level, but certainly something could be looked at. And the one up north of 270, we've not gotten to that level since it's in the I-270 pre-NEPA activities, and we're not to that level of detail yet in that study.
Thanks, Jeff. I have had this same conversation several times with the state, and the answer has been similar to what you provided. So how do we make sure that that bridge, whatever happens to it, if there's a reconstruction of it, well, frankly, I think it ought to be reconstructed to support a third track, no matter what. Like I believe that's an important part of a Mark expansion strategy, and so if that bridge gets touched, it ought to happen. But really, it ought to happen as part of that phase. They're going to be there anyway. It could be very efficient to upgrade that. So, you know, at what point does that become a decision point in this process?
Well, we've not really entered into conversations with CSX yet. We've been working on scheduling meetings with them, so it'll be a point we will certainly bring up with them, though.
Okay, thank you. And I just asked Glenn and Chris, let's not lose sight of that one. You know, it obviously would be a huge mistake for us not to address it and then have to deal with it after the fact somehow. Glenn?
While you're talking about that kind of thing, could I just jump in with something? Eileen Finnegan from Hillendale, who reads everything, read this report, And she just wanted to make sure that when this is in stage 2, so this is many years off possibly, but when the Beltway Bridge over New Hampshire Avenue is redone, if managed lanes go in there, and if there's an interchange with direct ramps going there, she wanted to make sure that the clearance, the horizontal clearance underneath for New Hampshire Avenue is wide enough to accommodate the New Hampshire Avenue BRT. So is that something that the state's looked at so far as well? Did I lose everybody there? Do I go out for a while?
That's a great question.
Does that go to Jeff? Is that?
Oh.
Sorry, if I heard you correctly, you asked about the 650 bridge. The Beltway Bridge over 650 and the horizontal clearance for the future BRT.
Yes.
I don't know off the top of my head if we've accommodated that, but we can certainly go back and look at it. It's obviously a planned improvement, and we want to make sure whatever we're building would accommodate that.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Okay, so I think I'm done, but my takeaway here, this is a good plan. It's sort of internal to, it's kind of inside the box of the strategy, and unanswered questions are the 10%, how that will happen, and for us as a county, Quarter Cities Transitway, market expansion, still very much on the top of my agenda to figure out how that will be addressed in the course of this. And it sounds like that's the conversation still ahead of us. Is that a fair takeaway, Chris and Glenn?
I think that is. And the
Yes,
10%,
yeah.
the 10% was the earlier Board of Public Works action. It's not specifically referenced in the actual approval of this phase. The MOU reaching agreement with the counties, affected counties, is what the subject is.
Thank you.
Could I add one more thing just as a request? When Mr. Hucker and I were talking about this meeting, at some point we thought, well, if the DEIS was going to be coming out on June 12th, which was the original idea, maybe we'd get a briefing on what was in that. Obviously, that's not going to happen now until maybe mid-July, maybe. But if we could ask Ms. Choplin and the group if they could be available for a similar briefing, but on now the entire DEIS, sometime in late July, soon after the DEIS is released, I think the committee would benefit from hearing, again, a briefing on that. Knowing that you'll come back after the summer, once the public hearings are done, and then at some point be making a recommendation as to what should be done. And then, of course, that would go to the full council. So, Lisa, is that something you can...
Yes, Glenn, I'm going to keep my video, I'm keeping my video off because when I turned it on, you broke up, but I did hear most of what you asked. And yes, so when we have a defined, definitive date for the release of the DEIS, again, our expectation is that it will be released in mid-July. We will come back if you'd like us to. We'll bring our environmental manager, Karen Brookman, who's been leading the effort related to the DEIS, and try to give you I would say a high level synopsis of what's in there, just for your reference. The DEIS itself, I think, is upwards of 300 pages, and the technical reports and all the appendix are in excess of 18,000 pages. So just FYI. So just keep that in mind. I don't, when I say high level, it's, we'll have to work with each other on kind of what you're looking for, because, obviously we don't have the capability to dive into, the
Sure.
details of those technical reports.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Choplin, one last question is on my mind. I was, very concerned to learn back in, I think it was December or January, about a 1958 MOU between Mdot and Wssc, stipulating that Wssc is responsible for all infrastructure changes in an Mdot right-of-way, and that would lead to, by Wssc's analysis, up to $2 billion in additional costs to potentially the ratepayers of Wssc. I got to say, I was disappointed to not learn that from our partners at Mdot, but from a whistleblower. And so my colleagues and I joined our colleagues in Prince George's and wrote to you asking for stipulating that we would not we're not in the mood to approve increases in WSSC rates for our ratepayers, since the governor's made very clear that there would be no costs whatsoever to taxpayers of Maryland or ratepayers from this P3 project. It's a very ambitious and complicated project. We haven't received any response to our letter. Do you have a response for us?
So I can certainly look into where that response is. But I think, as Secretary Slater has probably mentioned to you, that we have, since that engagement with WSSC, we have, well, let me first say, we've been working with WSSC since the initiation of the program, so over 2 years now, as well as the other utility companies in the corridor. But we have, we have further reached out to WSSC and actually elevated those discussions to a higher level. And both parties, Mdot as well as WSSC, have committed to creating a specific working group to work through the different concerns that WSSC raised in their discussion with the council. Specific to the estimate, I believe the estimate that WSSC provided was based off of I shouldn't say an expectation, was an assumption that if every utility line within the corridor was impacted, and that would be the cost. We've been working with WSSC closely as we've gone through the NEPA process to further minimize impacts to their utility lines. And so we very confidently expect that the magnitude of impact to their lines that was reported is going to be significantly less. I will say also that the estimate, even if you took that estimate that was provided, we have factored that into the overall estimate of the program that was initially projected 2 years ago. And so we do feel that it has been at least at a high level covered. The other thing I mentioned, this kind of under these this pre-development agreement, a progressive P3, that gives us an added opportunity once we have a phase developer on board and we start to vet the design more definitively and working collaboratively with WSSC. So I just wanted to highlight that assumption that was, or the cost that was given previously by WSSC was really assuming that every utility would be impacted and the cost associated with that, which is not where we see this going.
Right. No, thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that you may not stand behind WSSC's estimate and that you might have a different estimate of the total cost, but I guess the basic principle is, does Mdot still stand behind the public statements that the governor and the secretary have repeatedly made that there would be no cost to taxpayers, including ratepayers, for this project, including utility relocation?
I'm going to have to defer to the statements made by the governor and the secretary on that.
Okay.
Can I just follow along there, Chairman?
Please, be my guest.
Yeah, just to state the obvious. Having ratepayers responsible for picking up costs associated with this project is totally unacceptable. Not going to happen. You would actually require the county councils of our counties to vote to fund those projects in the capital budgets of the WSSC. I can't imagine that the P3 wants to be relying upon the county councils to approve capital expenditures in the WSSC budget. So you're going to have to work that out. And please don't expect that we're prepared to add those expenses to the WSSC capital budget. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with my colleague, Elisa, and I gotta say, I at least have the impression that this arrangement was hidden from us, and it was disappointing not to learn about it from Mdot or all the hours and hours we've spent in briefings about this project. it was never disclosed until we heard from the whistleblower. So we hope to get a response to our letter soon, and I'm sure that Prince George's Council feels the same way.
Yeah, and I will certainly follow up on that.
Thank you. Dr. Orland, do you have anything else?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, listen, this is really helpful to all of us. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us, and we look forward to some further answers on some of the things that were identified today.
Thank you, and again, I'll put myself on video here. I'll try, but thank you very much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with the Transportation and Environment Committee. And as I said, we'll work with Dr. Orland once the DEI, in preparation for the DEIS being released, and work to come back in a month or so and to provide an update related to that.
Great. Thanks so much. Very helpful. Have a great afternoon. Committee members will hang around. We have another item on our calendar. Is Mr. Levchenko with us? Aha! He even dressed up to make us look bad. Jeez. I'll have to improve our game here, Keith, now that you're raising the stakes here. Okay, so
that looks like a beach cottage living room, Mr. Levchenko. I don't know.
No comment as to my current location.
He and Dick Cheney are in an undisclosed location. Okay, well, my colleagues know we're talking about water and sewer category changes. This is always much anticipated. One of the responsibilities of the council, of course, is to handle water and sewer category changes, requests from landowners who seek municipal water and sewer connections to their properties in the county. The council's approval of these requests is required by longstanding state law that calls on the council to adopt and periodically update a comprehensive waiver water and sewer plan for the county, which we then transmit to MDE. On April 16th, the council received some recommendations from the county executive regarding 3 proposed water and sewer plan amendments. 3 property owners have requested to connect to existing water and sewer pipes adjacent to their properties so they could modify the use of their property. Recommendations on these amendments were solicited from both the Park and Planning Commission and Wssc, and a public hearing was recently held before the council. And so now it's before the T&E committee whether to approve these changes. Mr. Levchenko, can you elaborate on what got us to this point?
Sure, and just to note, we have Alan Sukup from the Department of Environmental Protection here, and Catherine Nelson from the Planning Department. So they're available to speak as well. And Catherine also spoke at the hearing. You heard her speak to the Planning Board's recommendations. So as you know, we have the 3 category change requests. I was just going to go through them individually because, you know, if we had 15 or 20 of them, we might have to consider a different path. But with just 3, I think we can actually just go through them consecutively. So the first one, and I'm reading from the packet now that was provided by staff. On page 3 of that packet. Page 3. The first one is the Rubens Josefino request. It's a 2-acre RE2 zoned property located on Edna Road in Cloverly. The applicant seeking public sewer to serve the existing single-family home. The key issue here is that the property does predate an existing sewer manhole that abuts the property on the northeast portion. So it does meet the conditions of the water and sewer plan's abutting mains policy. But the wrinkle here is that to provide a direct connection to that manhole would require an on-site extension through the most sensitive areas of the property, and in fact through a conservation easement. So the executive had recommended, and the planning board also concurred with further exploration of other alignments that could be done either on-site or off-site to serve the property in a more environmentally beneficial way. And there are some options. There are some maps in the executive staff report that show the surrounding area and some potential off-site easements or on-site locations. So staff did concur with that recommendation to defer the request. Once again, it is consistent with the abutting mains policy, But in this case, an additional offsite alignment perhaps might still be the best way to go here to minimize the environmental impact. So staff is recommending deferral, which is consistent with the executive and the planning board. Any questions from?
Make a motion to support deferral. If I need
Sure.
to make.
And once again, we can take these at the end, or if you want to do a
Why
staff.
don't we take them in order?
Okay.
So there's a motion to support deferral. Is there a second?
Okay, there's no second. So
Mr. Glass, are you still with us?
I'm here.
I think.
I'm happy to second if that's allowed.
well, okay.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't have made a motion. We have a staff recommendation before.
Yeah.
We typically allow that to be a motion. So,
Yeah, fine.
Mr. Chairman, I'll turn
Yes,
it to you.
sounds good.
I just wanted to move us through. That's all.
Yeah, I don't think we need the formality of a motion if you're consistent with the staff and executive at this point.
Right.
Okay. The next item is a private institutional facility request. Once it's at the bottom of page 3 of the memo, I've got my write-up on this. It's about almost an 11-acre RE2 zoned property located on New Hampshire Avenue at the intersection with Briggs Cheney Road in the Cloverly planning area. The applicant is seeking to public water and sewer to build a house of worship with about 350 seats, as well as a parsonage on the two parcels, on one of the two parcels. The property is eligible already for public water service under the general water and sewer plan policies. The issue here is with regard to the sewer. The private institutional facilities policy does provide an avenue for consideration here for nonprofit institutions in areas that are otherwise generally not recommended for water and sewer in the relevant master plan, in this case, the Cloverly plan. However, the Pith policy does provide that possibility. I've noted here also that water and sewer mains are available along New Hampshire Avenue that abut the property, so connections could be made without opening up service to other properties that are ineligible, and that's a key element of the private institutional facilities policy, that the extensions not open up service to other ineligible properties. The other thing I wanted to note was that this is the first PIF request that we've had that's come up since the comprehensive rewrite of the water and sewer plan that the prior council approved in 2018. And it did include an additional step for PIF requests, basically for their plans to go through the Development Review Committee, which is an interagency county staff group that reviews all of the elements that you would typically see in a development request. And this is intended to really tease out any issues that may be involved in this early on so that they can be addressed before they get to this stage. And this request did go through that process, so I did want to emphasize that. And I did also want to note that in past PIF cases, the issue that the council has generally been concerned with, especially on the environmental side of this, is the potential imperviousness of the development. And this property does straddle the Northwest Branch and the Upper Paint Branch watersheds. The Upper Paint Branch special protection area is in play in that part of the property. That includes an impervious cap of 8% per property. And I did note here that the imperviousness on that portion, the portion of the property within the special protection area, based on their concept plan, is 7.2%. So they meet the special protection area guideline or requirement. On the balance of the property, which is within the Northwest Branch, Bryant's Nursery subwatershed, the master plan has a general recommendation for that subwatershed of 10 to 15%. So it's not a property-specific requirement, but it's one that's cumulative over time. But this particular request happens to be within that 10 to 15% guideline for the property itself as well. So I think that also does speak well for this request. In fact, I will say that historically we have seen PIF requests that can be well in excess of 20%, 30%, even 40% of imperviousness, primarily because you have substantial parking requirements associated with larger PIF uses. especially places of worship. If you have substantial seating capacity, then the permitting requirements will require substantial parking. So you tend to get very high imperviousness with larger facilities. This one happens to be a little bit lower than some we've seen, and that's why you're seeing these numbers. In fact, the overall imperviousness for this property is about 12.5%. So that's across both of the watersheds. I will note at the public hearing, we heard a couple of speakers in favor of the request, especially obviously the attorney for the applicant, as well as a representative of the applicant themselves, speaking to the positive nature of the development and the consistency with the master plan and the Pith policy requirements. We also heard from another speaker who concerned about the cumulative imperviousness impacts that I mentioned earlier, with other approvals in the same sub-watershed. The Jesus House, which came to the planning board within the last year or two for preliminary plan approval, as well as a recent Exxon station and car wash. So the imperviousness level in this area is beginning to approach that 15%, 10 to 15%, the upper end of that maximum recommended in the master plan. Now, I will note that the master plan itself is old. It's from 1997. So it is something that I'm not sure what the current plan is for its update, but perhaps Mrs. Nelson can speak to that. But that is one of the issues here, is that we have an old master plan, and we are starting to see the maximums that had been recommended in that being approached. So that is an issue that definitely needs to be reviewed. I will note also that the planning board, as I mentioned earlier, was supportive of this request, as was the planning department staff, and council staff is as well, based on its consistency with the master plan recommendations, the special protection area requirement, and as well as the water and sewer plan policies, specifically in this case, the Pith policy. So staff does concur with the executive recommendation in the planning board, and would be happy to answer any questions you have at this point.
Okay. Well, one question I received was from an individual concerned that if this were approved, this would enable more development in the area around Cloverly. Can you address that?
Not from the sewer extension, or not from the sewer connection for this property itself. That would have to be a separate development approval. And if another separate development required sewer as well, that would be something that would have to come to the council for a category change itself.
Or change the master plan, right.
Right. This request does not open up service to any other properties around it.
Right. Or any of the development. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
But any questions from my colleagues? Okay. We have a staff recommendation. Any objection to that? Great. Without objection. Well done, Mr. Lubchenko.
All right. The third request involves a 2-acre RE2 zoned property located on Trevilla Road, just south of DeFeath Mill Road in Gaithersburg. The applicant is seeking public sewer for an existing single-family home and expansion of an existing daycare use on that site. The executive staff report notes that WSSC has advised that a low-pressure off-site sewer hookup would be required that would cross several properties to serve this property. And I will note that this area of the master plan this area is outside the planned sewer envelope within the Potomac subregion master plan, which dates back to 2002. There is what's called a peripheral sewer policy that is available for consideration for properties that immediately abut the planned sewer envelope. In this case, the property is very, very close to the planned sewer envelope, but there is an intervening property between it and the envelope. So apart from the connection, wherever the connection would come from, the staffs universally agree that it's not consistent with the peripheral sewer policy. So I think we have a challenge there, the fact that it's not consistent with that or the master plan, or any policies within the water and sewer plan for that matter. So based on that, staff concurs with the executive and the planning board to deny this request at this time.
Any comments or objections to that question? Nope. Okay. I think without objection.
So that's it. We don't have it scheduled for the council yet because of our plans to try to get packets to the council a day earlier than in past cycles. It may not make it to the June 23rd. It may have to wait until the following week, but we will try to bring it back to the council in a timely manner.
Terrific. Okay. Without anything else, I guess we're adjourned. Thank you all so much for your help.